hello, and happy New Year if you watch this next year, or you watch it when it just comes out. I wrote a guide because that's just what players do when they have a specific deck they only play. And I wrote one every set. I just put it on my Metafy now because Metafy is actually pretty good after thinking it was terrible for so long. So I linked my Metafy down. Like if you want to check it out, don't know if there's any other guides on there. I think there was a buying guide for set six, sorry, just for week one, and then this is just where I put guides from going on. So I put this one on there, and then I've got a few more that I want to write as well and put on there as well. But yeah, this is sort of an announcement video just to say that guide's going out. I'll probably tweet about it as well, because we just got quite a lot of standard blue steel play in with the ramp and everything like that. And then just sort of to round it out and make this into like a proper video, I thought because the year's over, I'd like go over all of the big performing decks of the year. We can see sort of how Blue Steel has evolved over the year really. I mean, Locana's only really out for a year as well, but I thought it'd be nice, and you can sort of see the performance of the deck as well over the year. Because to be honest with you, right now, I think a lot of people can be a bit gloomy about the deck or gloomy about the deck for the last two sets. But actually, when I was getting all these lists up, I went through each of the big major Disney challenges, I realized like how well Blue Steel actually performs. Like it was top four, top eight quite consistently over all the major events. I think it peaked at Toronto, but that was around the time when it probably did peak. That was the non-Bucky, but Bucky meta, but we kind of peaked when Bucky peaked as well because we were like the best answer to that deck and it was the most popular deck. But yeah, I'll just go through this list and it'll be just kind of interesting just to round this out to make this into a proper video. And we'll start off with Jonathan Lambs, who's just like goated in the community. I think everyone knows him. This was his one in Las Vegas. We ended up getting fifth, so we got his top eight one. We actually got him on the channel for an interview as well. If you want to scroll through that and find it, but it's really cool. It's very standard blue steel. The one-off Tippo was really nice. I believe that was the set when we were trying to figure out if Tippo was good or not, because you still had Mickey and Quill. So we were like, I don't know if Tippo's good or not, but he kind of brought the uninkable countdown and still gave you a ramp option, was pretty nice. And I kind of like Tippo always because he was a way to um, declunk a hand. You know, if you double drew a whole new world, you know how to you could do something else with that, even if you didn't have the quill. And of course, it had the card, the Merlin's Cottage card, which I don't think Lamb ever went to play on with that card much more, maybe once or twice. But it was very interesting, and I think at events as well, it's always worth saying that like if you put a card like that in your list, it's pretty much going to catch people out. Like at any like stage, people are going to be practicing, and I'm pretty sure no one practiced against Merlin's Cottage. And as by itself doesn't do anything, it just shows you the top card of your opponent's deck and your deck as well. I still think there's a load of merit to that, sort of having a card like that, thinking, oh, I really can't lose this because it's a best of two, and I don't really know how to play around Merlin's Cottage, or I don't really know what he's going to do with that Merlin's Cottage. So I thought it was a really cool inclusion. I don't really know how many times he managed to use it in Swiss. I did go through it on the channel. We did see it on one of his videos as well, but that was a really cool choice in the list. Sorry if some of these players I don't know. There's like Lab and Justin and everyone like that, and Bad Vegas and those players, of course, I know. Terribly sorry if I don't remember who people are. This could have been Troll House. Sorry if this is not you, Troll House, but your surname. I'm gonna have to keep turning those adverts off. But this was another cool one as well. This was from back in Fort Worth, and Bell was sort of still around at that point. And Rise of Titans as well. Remember that card? Remember the countless hours spent debating if Rise of Titans was worth it, and then if Cusco or Simba was worth it, and now we just don't play any of it at all. Just remember all of that time we've spent doing that. If you're anyone who sits around in like Lorcana discords as well, just how long we spent sort of debating if that card was worth playing, and it just got cut. But I think at the time it was. You kind of knew that a majority of matchups, or like a good amount of them, were going to have a castle that you need to get rid of, and if you didn't, you sort of lost that matchup. And our boy as well, Argus, which for me, when I personally started using Argus, that was Justin or Jack Shadow had posted it in a Discord, and I picked it up, and I remember taking it to a store champs, and it was one of them cards where my opponent had to pick it up and read it a couple times, and then clarify to me that it's just a 4-1 vanilla. I always thought it was really cool. I really wanted to carry using that into set six, but with Steel being so popular and it doesn't really do much anymore, it was to stop that Flynn Sisu and see something to remove that Flynn, and move the Sisu, sorry, as well, because it would trade nicely into it. We just don't really need it anymore, but it was really cool that we had this sort of like answer to it. He was never an amazing card, having one strength. Like he only really did the job of stopping Flynn CC. But that was really cool, and it was nice to see that Bell was still around at that point. And there was a big debating, didn't we, used to do about, between Bell, Ariel, and I can't remember if Ariel was out at this point. Bell, Ariel, and Tamatoa, but and then we just ended up dropping the Bell. But yeah, it was nice to sort of reminisce and remember that card as well. Um, I really miss playing Bell, actually, to be honest with you. This is Bad Vegas's list. Really cool one. Watch the stream game. I don't know where you could watch it. Probably on YouTube. Someone's clipped it. Versus Sailor. And it was just like that matchup where, everything goes right for the Blue Steel player versus the Ruby Sapphire player, which is a matchup we sort of feared a little bit. But it was also, I really recommend watching actually if you can find it. So it was I Stephen Stephen is his actual name, but Bad Vegas is his online name that we've had him on the channel with as well. And it was back in the day where you could sort of the Ruby Sapphire by just continuously wheeling them, going over them, burning the good cards in their hand, and just playing something and dime tapping it. And they might have had one Judy Hops, they might have had something like that, but they didn't have Hideaway. And it was just really fun back then, because you just ramp really high, dime tap something, have the dime established. They're going to B prep whatever you play, and then you just play another thing, or play a bunch of stuff, or play the wheel and then play a bunch of stuff, then dime tap something, and you could just keep going. That massive advantage of them having to reset the board whilst you're continuously playing new stuff, and them having to react to that. So they are doing stuff. They are being like reactive to your stuff, but they were never really winning the race because you were always the one gaining the lore from the dime tap. And I used to really like that sort of matchup. I really stuck playing it until they got the hideaways, and and they had the Cuzco as well. That was also quite rough. The blue Cuzco that could remove something. So, it was putting it into the ink was always worse because even with Judy Hops, you could still technically live on the dream of getting it back with Tamatoa. And of course, yeah, Bell was still around at that point. No Aerials, so I think this is probably before Aerials. I really should have done my research before looking at these. I just thought it'd be fun to like scan over them and sort of watch my reaction as I look at all the lists. This is a top four one from Toronto, and again, this was back when, yeah, this is the Pyros build. I knew there was one in Toronto that got Pyros, and they have a stream game as well. You should watch that on YouTube if you can find it. And yeah, Toronto was that weird meta where it was Blue Steel was very good because we had a really good matchup with Bucky. But I remember a lot of people saying going into Toronto it wasn't really worth bringing Blue Steel because at this point Bucky had been banned into submission, or however you want to word it. He was really, really bad. You couldn't really play the card. So we lost like one of our good matchups, and we didn't really love any of the other matchups. But it still was not a Daisy meta, so Steel Song wasn't that bad. And a lot of people basically had written off Blue Steel as being the choice for that event, and people brought Blue Steel and did really, really well with it. We had a couple of people in the top 8. And yeah, I really like this list. I think if you can actually use Tile efficiently, that's cool. So much removal and reaction. And the Pyros, I never actually got to see it played, but yeah, you can just reset and start wiping a board. And the Pyros and Arthur, which people have tried recently, has just been so much fun. So yeah, that was a really cool list to mention. And it was a one jump ahead build. And remember those days as well, where like again, if you were spending too much time on Discord debating Blue Steel, like I was, big debate over one jump ahead or Mickey being which one was better. And at this point, I think everyone's just settled on Sail as probably the best one, especially in set 6. But back then, it was both were valid, both had really cool reasonings why you'd play them. So yeah, that was just interesting as well. And yes, this should be the other Toronto list. Yes, we had this gentleman on to interview. Did really really well. I think managed to beat Fam, who was. I even said during the interview like you beat one of the most sort of decorated red blue players because I think at that point he'd made cut and gone very far every regional he had attended, and he just didn't really know too much about that, but it was quite interesting. And back then as well, you could play Chi and Po. Um, which was really fun. I think Chimpo right now gets punished a bit too much by Go-Go, and it doesn't impact the board enough when you play it, especially if you're trying to answer evasive things and you spend that much time setting up a 4-7. And Maui's go down to like counts of 2 in Ruby Amethyst, and you might see like 4x Maui's in Ruby Sapphire, but we're just not needing to protect from things like that anymore. And with the Crab Fox, they can actually deal with it. Not effectively, but they can deal with it. But yeah, Chiempo, he was a great card at that point. And Beast as well, Hardhead Beast. I used to always argue that a 4/4 for 5 ink was still good, and if you got to use the effect, that was also really good as well. And I just liked having that my deck had an option for everything. So like, I remember times where you'd use it for a dime or a quill was its purpose, but it'd be like you'd play against someone with like an Emerald Chromacon or something like that, and it was just nice that you could be, and I can remove that because I don't like that. I don't know what it's doing, and even at store champs level where you get to play against people bringing very varied decks, people aren't playing particularly what you'd expect like high meta at store champs, or at least in my experience at some store champs. So you'd play against someone who had like a princess deck with the thing that gains of law every time you play a princess, and it was like, great, well I can answer that, so I don't lose this round. Or even like versus flutes as well in Steel Song. I just like that I could cover that if I ever ended up playing against it, because I always seem to get paired into such random decks. And Gaston as well. I'd really like to play that card again, especially in a no-wheel list. I think if it was inkable, it would have been never debated that you'd play it because just strong questers, strong bodies, card advantage cards, like just all worth it, all definitely worth playing. So he was just another card where it was like we had to miss out on him because he's uninkable, and I hope Ravensburger sort of notices that there are a ton of fun cards that we'd love to play. I think the latest gym shift line with the 5 cost gym that's uninkable is worth mentioning. We'd love to play all these cards, but we need to fire the cannons, and like most of these lists needs whole new world, and you need to grab your swords, and you need and then you're working up to just a high amount of uninkables where it's just justifying the rest of the uninkable space is pretty hard. Getting Calhoun's in the list or a Gaston, you're upping it by another 4, or 5, or however many you included both of them. So I just really wish they'd add some really awesome, fun power spike cards that were inkable just for us, just so we can include it and just maybe get some more strength back into Sapphire Steel. It just kind of feels like they've decided which decks they wanted to buff, and they're getting quite far ahead. But then I can argue that and then say that the Genie and Daisy Duck are both uninkables as well, so it is a give and take. But I'd also argue that Gaston isn't as strong as the Genie or Daisy Duck. But now I'm not even talking about the list, I'm just complaining about stuff. So hey, there was a Mickey build again, and that was an awesome list. Thank you for having a look. And this one was in Lille, so this was the first of the UK ones. And look at some of these awesome cards in there. It was the Robin Hood shift line, which back in set 3 was very debatable, was better because you could interact with aggro decks a lot more, and lower to the ground decks. So like you didn't have to, you could do the option of shift wheel if you really wanted to, or shift start attacking things. I think the ideal line, they must have it here. Yes, it was to play Robin Hood, one jump ahead, then take the shift, just so you secured your ramp, and then you also got the 3/6 set up, and you could wheel or you could do whatever you wanted for that point out. And there's just loads of fun stuff in here. One Benger, that's just awesome. Like when we're debating things like that, I think lists have got very refined these days. Like if you look at these sort of older Sapphire Steel lists, they're very toolboxy. They're very all over the place. Like, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean they just had like one-offs, like one-off Titans as well. Like you could just one-off everything because also back then we could be a bit more confident with playing the whole new world. Like right now we play a whole new world and they return with playing like 2 daisies or 2 genies or whatever they play. We can be in a really rough spot and it can just lose us the game there and then. So we just tend to not wheel as much anymore. But back then it was like not that scary to wheel. So you could just do these one-off things like that, like one-off Titans, one-off Venger, and then just play the whole new world and find the cards you wanted to. And the Audrey as well. I mean, that was just another fun choice. That's just another warded 5 drop. That's awesome. I don't really have too much to say on Audrey because I never really got into playing her too much. I didn't think it was amazing, but that was just another fun pick. And Develop Your Brain, I remember there were debates we had back when where Sky said it was fundamental that you had 4x of Develop Your Brain. And I believe there was a lot of other players like R&B who said, no, I don't think the card's very much needed. And yeah, it was just a scrying card. But back then you didn't have visions of the future. You didn't have all these other scrying cards, so it actually was really quite impactful, and it would just up that percentage chance of you getting ramp or you finding the removal card you wanted or whatever. So before visions, it was just develop rain was amazing. So yeah, that I remember being on the side of we have to keep 4x of that in the deck, and I don't really want to cut down. As of course, when we got new cards in, it was slowly being like, I don't really need this card, I need space, and the card just got dropped for just we need space in the deck, especially with the way that Sapphire still works. You got 4 Hirams, you got 4 Porps, 4 oh yeah, it's not Fortispheres back here, and that's why we. Oh, that was it. We dropped the Developing Brain for the Fortispheres. That was mad. That was mad. I'm trying to remember the timeline, and then all these other things as well. that just kind of have to be 4x like Fishbone Quill. I was hoping to look back and find a list of Mukduk Mandarin, but I haven't seen any. Because that was also a fun time, but that must have been just before the sort of regional events actually happened. There was a bit more in the online environment of the game, which I could have went back and found lists for, but I'm not very good at navigating ink decks. So yeah, here's one from Bologna as well. When did they end up getting fourth, which is really good. And that's what I'm trying to say is like Sapphire Steel has consistently over. If you were to take the whole regionals, consistently it has done well. It has always been in a good top four, top eight finish. It never quite finishes and comes first, and of course recently we're seeing it perform less and less as the other decks get quite power creeped and we're not as keeping up as much. But um, yeah, I just think the deck's always been performing quite well. So if you took like a lifespan of the deck, it's done quite good for itself. And with TCGs, I think you don't particularly always look at what finishes first because they could have just had an amazing day. And like, no disrespect to the person who finished in Atlanta first, they had an awesome run where they got all the matchups they want. But let's be honest, no one's playing the deck. No one's playing red, purple, Fassa. Oh, what was it? Yeah, it's no, sorry, amber, purple, Fassa. No one's playing that deck. And no one played that deck after the event. So it's good to look at all of the results from like 1 to 16 or 1 to 32 because out of 2,000 players, these were the best decks. So yeah, top four is always an amazing finish as well, in my opinion. Equal to or less than the decks above and below it. And yeah, here's a cool one, and this is where we're seeing Ariel pop in. I remember people going, I don't know, Ariel's all right, but uninkable. And this was another thing I'm trying to state about. They should probably release more inkable cards that are great. She was debated for so long about being in the list and if she's good or not, and we're still seeing Bell and Tamatoa used. But now she's just a staple. You kind of have to play her. She's really amazing. She just cheers up so many matchups and makes the whole deck a lot better. But back then it was just like trying to work in another uninkable. And we have been able to swap things around. Like Mickey's not seen as common, so we can do other uninkables. But yeah, it was just back then we were even debating if Ariel's better than Bell, and at this point we wouldn't even debate putting in Bell. I think especially with cards like Brawl and stuff like that, and Zeus, it's just you'd have to get the dime tap on the turn, and then hopefully get another bit of questing done. But Ariel's just leagues above it right now and performing a lot better, especially in a Sisu meta. So yeah, this was just interesting to see sort of decks slowly creep into what we're seeing right now. And this is from Bologna actually. Yeah, I couldn't remember which event Moyen made cut in. Peng. I don't know if he knows that's like peng ting, like a UK slang thing, but that's kind of cool. And this was I thought it was a no-will list actually, but no, it wasn't. It was the one where yes, he went 5 removal cards, and he did a really cool write-up on it, which will be out of date now, but it was a really good write-up. And it was just basically I need to answer so many things early on. I don't see why I wouldn't go to this many early removal cards. Which at the time I think people were debating like 3 or 4 babooms, but Moyen went fully in on it and got all of this stuff in, so that's really awesome. And then yeah, it's just I didn't. I sorry, he did in Seattle. He made Cut of Skies list. Sorry, that's where he's done it, and I've just watched him perform so well with no wheel. But yeah, he's just basically put a ample amount of answers in, loads of card draw, the Gastons, and it's just what you'd expect. Only 4 Tamatoas, but I think that's kind of enough. Gaston as well, debatable that he is also just a really good dime target. He sort of does everything. He draws you a card, decent body on the board, and he's a good quester. So yeah, that's a really cool list. And I liked that he just went one extra just to make sure that he'd always get the Diablo, or he'd always shut off the shift line as well. And we're getting to the end now. This is one of R&B's lists from Atlanta, I believe. I picked the Atlanta list, yes. Because he did get a cut at the other list, but at the other event, but I believe it was almost the same list. And yeah, I remember Simba's very, very good. I can't debate that Simba's a bad card. You like play him and pretty much you can play him any list and he's pretty good. Right now, he must get punished by Tamatoa. But back then, it was debating if you'd play Simba or not because the Tinkerbell was doing such a good job at sort of winning everything. Tinkerbell and Grab Your Swords, like the point of having Simba for me personally just didn't seem that important. And back then as well, we didn't have particularly too heavy on the dime targets. Free Bell was fine. But you were dime tapping all these little cheap things as well, like just to get that 2 lore and stuff like that. The game wasn't as fast as well, I believe, back in set 3, in my opinion, where you could do, play stuff out, they board prep, board wipe, play Lucky Diamond, just like play a Smee, tap it, make them respond to it, because their responses would be a little bit weaker as well back then. and just slowly like get over the finish line with that. But look at the difference with that. And then there's Baboom and Fire the Cannons. Of course, this was a pre-Diablo meta. You wanted to answer those Earthlers on 3 because Green Steel was using Ursula and there's aerial, so Smash was actually quite important. And RMV's always been quite a big supporter of Smash as well. So yeah, it's really cool. I keep forgetting that Fortesphere wasn't around in set 3. That's mad. And Captain Hook as well. Oh, mad. Because yeah, I mean having the alternate one drop as well. We didn't. I didn't think we had Argus back then either. So Captain Hook was fine, and these were like just a nightmare combo for people to come out to, and you could just do loads of work with that. And yeah, I kind of miss Captain Hook, but right now he's so unimpactful on the board, doesn't really do much. He's not really going to answer much either, but yeah, that's kind of cool that we saw Captain Hook get into, I think, a top 8, did he? Yeah, finished 8th. Yeah, but that's a really cool list as well. And I remember seeing it, like the further back you go this list, the more Bell you see, I find. And I've got one last list, and it's Justin's. Save the best for last, Justin's list. He's top 4-1 in Bochum, and I'm going to pronounce that wrong. Germans have corrected me many, many times. Um, I as many as I like looking at everyone's like Blue Steel lists. I like looking at Lamb's R&B's, Bad Vegas's, the other Justin as well. Like anyone's list as well. Because also I always find for the untrained eye, I'm gonna say a Blue Steel list will look the same to most people. It would be your Porps, Forces, your wheels, and your dimes and stuff like that. But there's so many minute differences that you can see, and you can find interesting. And I remember seeing this one. I don't think he liked the scuttle. When I watched it on stream, I think it like whiffed or like really negatively impacted him every time he used it. But it's just awesome. There's so much toolboxing going on here. Like look at this like ones and two copies of like removal cards that you've just got all there, so you can confidently play the wheel and scry and stuff like that, and find answers for a one-off beast as well, just to try and improve sort of mirror matchups. And remember, you had to worry about the mirror matchups back then; they were quite important. And then there's a 2-2-3 split. I think this was like 64 cards in total, or 62 cards, sorry. But yeah, look at all that, just relying on the SME, but you got loads of answers early on. And I just love that there's like so much going on with this list, compared to like the way that we have to build Blue Steel nowadays, where it's like we're very refined, we're trying to get close to 4x copies of things as we can, and then tech cards are like 2 to 3x's, but there's just so many one-offs. I love it. It's just a much more interesting time to sort of deck build, and the two of Titans and one-off Zeus. Yeah, I think this one's always one that interests me the most. Also going over 60. There was a lot of decks, I think, as well. The Toronto list both went over 60 cards, and that got a lot of people thinking. But yeah, I just thought I'd scroll through some of the past events and sort of look at the lists. I think this one was probably my favorite one to look at, and that's why I put it at the end. Um, and I feel kind of cringe that none of these are the lists that I had, but I think it's nice to share and sort of show the community. Um, sort of how good Blue Steel can be and has been, and like how we've actually had a pretty good year. So like kind of feeling glum that it's not performing that well in set 6, but then again, set 3 it was pretty good. Set 4 we were pretty good. Kind of been on a downhill slope since set 4, but I'm pretty sure with any TCG there only has to be like a another expansion with like new cards in that could buff us up again. And there's other decks that have been waiting on their turn, like green purple was very good, and then like Bucky Diablo sort of shut it down, and now it's back up to being this really really powerful deck again, where it's having like huge meta shares, and there's no reason why we can't be in that, especially when this game relies on these color combo sort of like deck building. So yeah, that's just sort of a mention that I've got a guide coming out, and I'll put a link somewhere. And then we had a good year, and happy new year to everyone.